The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Courtroom 7B, casting their sterile glow on another Monday morning docket. Judge Catherine Morrison had seen it all in her 23 years on the bench: petty thieves, repeat offenders, desperate souls caught in the grinding machinery of a system that rarely showed mercy. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment when the bailiff called the next case, and an elderly man shuffled forward in clothes that had seen better days, his weathered hands trembling as he gripped a worn canvas bag. He was thin, too thin, with a gray beard that spoke of months without proper shelter. His jacket, though clean, bore the unmistakable signs of age and exposure to the elements. As he stood before the bench, there was a dignity in his bearing that seemed at odds with his appearance, something in the way he held his shoulders back, despite everything life had thrown at him. The prosecutor read the charges in a monotone voice: trespassing, loitering, resisting arrest. Standard fare for the homeless population that cycled through these halls with depressing regularity. Judge Morrison glanced at the file before her, skimming the usual litany of minor offenses. But then her eyes caught on a name, and something shifted in the air of that courtroom. Her hand froze mid-reach for her gavel. The name on the paper before her wasn't just any name, it was a name she recognized, a name that carried weight and history. "State your name for the record," she said, her voice carefully controlled, though something flickered in her eyes. "James William Hendricks, Your Honor," the man replied, his voice steady despite his circumstances. The judge leaned forward slowly. "Sergeant James William Hendricks." The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, ma'am. United States Marine Corps, retired." What happened next would be talked about in that courthouse for years to come. Judge Morrison stood up from her bench, something she almost never did, and in a voice that rang with authority and emotion, she said, "Everyone in this courtroom will rise." There was a confused shuffling as lawyers, clerks, and spectators slowly got to their feet, uncertain what was happening. The prosecutor looked bewildered. Even James seemed confused, his weathered face showing vulnerability for the first time. "Bailiff," the judge continued, her voice thick with emotion, "do you recognize this man's name?" The bailiff, a retired Army veteran himself, squinted at the file that was handed to him. As recognition dawned, his entire demeanor changed. He straightened to attention, his hand moving instinctively to a salute. Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom, her voice carrying to every corner. "This man standing before us today is a Medal of Honor recipient. On November 12, 1994, Sergeant Hendricks was deployed with his unit in Somalia during Operation United Shield. When his convoy came under heavy fire, and an IED disabled their lead vehicle, Sergeant Hendricks single-handedly pulled 4 wounded Marines from a burning Humvee while under continuous enemy fire. He sustained 3 gunshot wounds and severe burns in the process. He then provided covering fire while medics evacuated the wounded, refusing to leave his position until every one of his brothers was safe." The courtroom had gone completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Several people in the gallery had tears streaming down their faces. The young prosecutor, who couldn't have been more than 28, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. James stood there, his eyes fixed somewhere in the middle distance, his jaw working as if he was trying very hard not to let 30 years of pain show on his face. The judge wasn't finished. Sergeant Hendricks spent 18 months in recovery. He was honorably discharged, decorated, and sent home to build a life. She paused, looking directly at him. "What happened, Sergeant? How did you end up here?" For a long moment, James didn't speak. When he finally did, his voice was quiet but clear. "Life happened, Your Honor. My wife passed away 7 years ago, cancer. The medical bills took everything we had. I have a daughter, Emily. She's 12 now, lives with her aunt in Philadelphia. Good home, good school. I couldn't give her that. I tried, but after the PTSD got bad, after I lost our house, I knew she deserved better than what I could provide." He swallowed hard. "I send her letters. She doesn't know I'm living on the streets. Her aunt tells her I'm working overseas, that I'm on a special assignment. It's better that way. I was sleeping in an abandoned warehouse when the police found me. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just needed somewhere warm for the night. The officer, he was young, just doing his job. I should have complied faster, but sometimes when someone shouts at me unexpected, I'm back there, you know. Back in Mogadishu. The courtroom remained silent as James's story unfolded like a map of everything wrong with how veterans are treated in America. Judge Morrison's hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white. "Your Honor, if I may," a voice rang out from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to see a tall man in a Marine Corps dress uniform striding down the aisle. Gunnery Sergeant Michael Torres, retired. "I was one of the men Sergeant Hendricks pulled from that Humvee in '94. I wouldn't be here today without him. My 3 kids wouldn't exist without him." The prosecutor started to object, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. "I'll allow it." Torres approached James, who was staring at him with an expression of shock and disbelief. "Jimmy," Torres said, his voice cracking. "We've been looking for you for 2 years. Ever since you dropped off the grid. The guys from the old unit, we've been searching." "Mike." James's voice was barely a whisper. "You got old. We both did, brother." Torres turned to address the judge. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to present an alternative to whatever punishment is being considered. There's a veterans center in Fairfax, Virginia. They have housing, medical care, mental health services. My organization, Marines Looking After Marines, will cover all costs. We take care of our own." Before the judge could respond, another voice called out, "Your Honor, Rebecca Martinez, Director of the Veterans Housing Alliance. We have an immediate opening in our transitional housing program. We can also help Sergeant Hendricks access his VA benefits, which he's entitled to but apparently never filed for." Then another voice, and another. A local businessman offering a job. A therapist specializing in PTSD offering pro bono services. A lawyer offering to help with legal paperwork. It was as if the entire courtroom had transformed into a mission to save one man's life. Judge Morrison had to wipe her eyes before she could speak. "Sergeant Hendricks, I'm dismissing all charges. Not only that, but I'm going to make some calls myself. There are programs, resources, benefits that you've earned and deserve." She came down from her bench, something that violated every protocol, and approached James directly. She spoke quietly, so only those nearby could hear. "My father was a Marine. He served in Vietnam. He came home to a country that didn't appreciate his sacrifice, and he struggled every day of his life because of it. He died 5 years ago, and I never got to help him the way I should have. Let us help you, please." James's composure finally cracked. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks as he nodded, unable to speak. The next hour was a blur of activity. Phone calls were made. Arrangements were put in place. Torres wrapped a jacket around James's shoulders, a Marine Corps jacket with unit patches that James hadn't seen in decades. Rebecca Martinez sat with him, filling out paperwork, making phone calls, coordinating with the VA hospital. But the most profound moment came when Judge Morrison made one more call. She spoke quietly into her phone for several minutes, then handed it to James. "There's someone who wants to talk to you." James took the phone hesitantly. "Hello, Daddy." A young girl's voice came through, uncertain and hoping. "Is it really you?" James nearly dropped the phone. His hand shook violently as he pressed it to his ear. "Emmy, baby girl, Aunt Sarah told me everything. She said you've been trying to take care of yourself so you could come back to me properly. She said you've been sick but that you're going to get better now. Daddy, please get better. I need you." "I will, baby girl. I promise. I'm going to get better, and then I'm coming to see you. I'm so sorry I stayed away." Judge Morrison talked to Aunt Sarah. "She says there's a way for you to be near me while you get help. Daddy, I don't care where you've been or what happened. I just want my dad back." As James sobbed into that phone, telling his daughter he loved her over and over again, there wasn't a dry eye in Courtroom 7B. Even the bailiff, a tough-as-nails veteran himself, was openly crying. 3 months later, Judge Morrison received a letter. It was written in careful, deliberate handwriting on clean white paper. James Hendricks wrote to tell her that he was living in transitional housing, attending therapy 3 times a week, and working part-time at a warehouse, something simple that didn't trigger his PTSD. He saw his daughter every weekend. He had gained 20 pounds and was working with the VA to address his medical needs. But the most important part of the letter was this: "You asked me that day what happened, how I ended up where I was. The truth is, I felt forgotten. I felt like I'd given everything I had for my country, and when I needed help, there was nowhere to turn. But you reminded me that day that I wasn't forgotten. You reminded everyone in that courtroom that veterans are people, that we matter, that our service means something. You didn't just save my life that day, Your Honor. You gave me back my dignity. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back my hope. The letter concluded, I'm testifying before a city council committee next month about veteran homelessness. Mike Torres and I are starting a program to find other veterans living on the streets, guys like me who fell through the cracks. We're calling it, No Marine Left Behind, and it's expanding to include all branches of service. If my story can help one other veteran find their way home, then maybe everything I went through meant something. Judge Morrison kept that letter in her desk drawer. On difficult days, when the parade of broken humanity through her courtroom felt overwhelming, she would take it out and read it again. It reminded her why she became a judge in the first place, not to punish, but to see the person standing before her, to recognize their humanity, and when possible, to offer a path toward redemption. James Hendricks had gone to court expecting judgment. Instead, he found compassion, community, and a second chance. His story spread through social media, news outlets, and veteran communities across the country. It sparked conversations about how America treats its veterans, about the gaps in the system, about the invisible men and women who served their country and then found themselves forgotten. But more than that, it reminded people of a simple truth: kindness matters. Recognition matters. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply see another person, really see them, and acknowledge their worth. James Hendricks walked into that courtroom homeless and hopeless. He walked out surrounded by brothers in arms who refused to let him fall any further. In the end, it wasn't the system that saved James Hendricks. It was humanity, the judge who recognized a name and refused to let it pass unnoticed, the veteran who stood up for his brother, the community that rallied around a stranger, and a 12-year-old girl who just wanted her father back. That morning in Courtroom 7B, justice wasn't blind. Justice saw clearly, looked with compassion, and chose mercy. And in that choice, everyone present learned what it truly means to honor those who serve.